from today. 3 weeks from today. 45,000 nutcases will be at Yankee Stadium for opening day 2025. And a few Met fans will fly down to Houston for opening day 2025. Now, we got a lot to get to today. Bad Tiki will join the program at 4:30. We will hear the latest in Almost Champions as we are honoring the most beloved New York Almost Champions. We got a lot of football to get to later on as well. But as we sit here 3 weeks away from opening day, there is something very, very important that we all need to accept. And that is the fact that Giancarlo Stanton is a rumor. Giancarlo Stanton is not a Yankee right now. And we have to look and view Giancarlo Stanton as a luxury if he ever comes back. Because Brian Cashman updated us about 3 hours ago. And the update on Giancarlo Stanton is basically, still not doing baseball activities. We gave him a PRP injection, and we'll hope for the best. And I take that, Teak, as you almost have to forget he exists. Because you cannot rely, and I like Giancarlo. I've defended Giancarlo. Right. But you cannot rely on him to be a big part of this Yankee lineup at all this season.
Well, at least not in the regular season. You just hope that he's postseason Giancarlo Stanton. But look, I think we all know, and we kind of accepted it last year when he got the hamstring injury rounding third base. It looked like it was nothing. It's like, come on, how are you hurt again? But we saw that when he, I think, very judiciously took care of himself to be ready for when it mattered, and then he was unbelievable in the postseason. We accepted that the injury is just part of his existence right now.
Right.
So what you're saying is so true. The only thing that you worry about is that repeatable, right? Is it easy to just, all right, guys, I'm just going to chill over here on the side, but when you need me, I'll be ready. Right? It's easy to say that. It's much harder to do that on a consistent basis. Now, he did it last year. Part of it was because he came back midway through the season, and we kind of knew what the path was, right? Well, I remember we interviewed Aaron Boone, and he said, he told us exactly when he's coming back. And that's exactly when he came back. He was ready for the rest of the regular season, and then he was great in the postseason. This is open-ended. We have no idea, and I don't think Giancarlo Stanton has any idea as well.
No, and I think what makes it even more concerning is the fact that this issue he's dealing with, the dueling tennis elbow, is something he had to play through last season, and he's still dealing with it right now to where he's not going to perform any baseball activities for the foreseeable future. So if you look at the last 4 years of Giancarlo, the post-pandemic years, as I like to call it, he's played 139 games, 110 games, 101 games, and last year he played 114 games, and you defined it. He kind of had that vacation, if you will, in the middle of the season. But we knew how much time he would miss. He came back, and we all know about the great impact he had in October. As we sit here today on March 6th, it is unrealistic and naive to think he's playing the amount of games he's played in any of the last 4 years. And what makes that concerning is that I look at Stanton as someone I needed to rely on more with this lineup than I did last year.
Right.
Because last year, there was Juan Soto. Last year, eventually, Gleyber Torres took over as the leadoff hitter. The leadoff question is still open-ended. More on that a little bit later on. So I think they needed Stanton more. And I look at his last 4 years when he's played the 119, 139, 110 games. He'll give you 25, 30 home runs. I think that is unrealistic to expect right now. And that's not because I'm being negative on March 6th. It's because I'm listening to what the GMs say. He received his second PRP injection. He's going to rejoin the team this weekend. He's not slated to do any baseball activities. He hasn't swung a bat now, if you do the math, in about 7 weeks. So why would anybody think he's going to come back anytime soon and then stay on the field?
Yeah, there isn't any. There can't be much optimism for that at all. But what in his stead, you just have to hope that the Martians of the world, Jason Dominguez, that Ben Rice, that Oswaldo Cabrera, that all those guys take the next step. And if they don't, then you're worried. But I think this is just like any team in Major League Baseball that partly spends money to build their roster, but you can't do that for everybody unless you're the Dodgers. You got to just hope that your young players start to really evolve into stars. Maybe not superstars, but to stars, and can give you production Not at the level of Giancarlo Stanton, but something that makes it feel like you're not having this void in the middle of your lineup.
Well, replacing Giancarlo, which is obviously the logical next question of, okay, if you guys don't believe he's playing for a while, who's playing in his stead?
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a numerous people. But I'll tell you one thing I would do right off the top. Because there's been this argument around here that's been going on now for a couple of weeks, and it's this whole Jason Dominguez can't play left field. Jason Dominguez should play center field. Jason Dominguez can't catch a fly ball. What the New York Yankees need from Jason Dominguez more than anything else, you know what they need? They need his
big bat.
They need him to mash.
Right.
They need him to mash. And so the first thing I would do is I would basically tell Jason Dominguez, you'll play the outfield. But more times than not, you're going to be the DH. Because I think what Jason Dominguez needs to do is take a deep breath. Mm-hmm. He needs to relax, and he needs to hit the living crap out of the baseball a lot. And so that doesn't mean he shouldn't play left field. He should. But I think that DHing, let's say 3, 4, maybe even 5 days a week, should be in the cards for him. Right. You know, Aaron Judge is going to get his DH day. Paul Goldschmidt's going to get his DH day. So that's why I can't say it's 100% of the time and he's not going to play the outfield. He should play the outfield. But I think taking that off his plate just slightly helps him. And if that gets more out of him offensively, that's what they need.
Yeah.
Because Jason Dominguez needs to hit. You talked about all the different guys that need to step up, and there's a host of guys with Giancarlo out and Soto not being in that building and Glaber not being in that building. It almost starts with Jason Dominguez. So I like the idea of just telling Jason, look, you're going to play the outfield. Don't worry, Martian. Yeah. But you're going to DH a lot just to take a little bit of pressure off.
How many years are left on Giancarlo's contract? 4, 3, 4, something like that?
I think it's 3 more years.
Yeah, but whatever it is, this is the sign that Brian Cashman and the New York Yankees need to start actively finding his replacement. And it's not a knock on Giancarlo's career. It just is what it is. You deal with it every single season. At some point, there's an injury that puts him on the IL for 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever number of days it is. It happens every single season. For the most part, it doesn't cripple you. But you're getting to the point now where it's going to cripple you.
Well, you know what the difference is? So last year, when we talked about Giancarlo at this time, at this moment, I think we viewed him very differently in this lineup. I think we viewed him as, I did at least, hey, you know what? Right-handed DH.
Right.
Little platoon player. We have to view Giancarlo differently at this part of his career as a 34-year-old, injury-prone designated hitter. And I think most of us accepted that. And then he went out and had, a relatively good year, mostly stayed healthy outside of that respite on the IL, and we all know what he did in the postseason. I think because of the way the offseason went, losing Juan Soto, attempting to replace him with pieces like Cody Bellinger and Paul Goldschmidt, and having an opening at third base.
But still, those are short-term.
Absolutely, but I think it elevated the need and the reliance on Giancarlo Stanton. I think the Yankees are more reliant on him today than they were a year ago, which is why an injury to him like this, to me, is more significant than it would have been a year ago. And I think that's the difference. You talk about replacing him. Yeah. I thought they sort of did last year. Like, I viewed Juan Soto as the Aaron Judge insurance. They didn't need him as much.
I don't know if they were trying to replace him. I don't think that was their active thought.
I'm not saying they tried to. I'm saying they didn't need him as much. No,
of course they did. But what I'm saying is that they actively need to be thinking about what's our roster look like post Giancarlo Stanton. You have to start thinking about that. I don't think they did that last year. I think last year it was, we're going to trade for Juan Soto and accent our roster, and we're going to be championship viable. And Giancarlo Stanton was part of that.
Right.
But I think now what you have to do is say, he can't be someone we rely upon any longer.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to think about that because there's still 3 years. You were right, Evan. This year and 26 and 27, 28 is a club option, which they obviously will not pick up. And so you got to start thinking of it preemptively. How do we replace that production? And it sucks because he's such a good club guy and a clubhouse guy, always answers the questions, stands up for all the failures or disappointments or whatever it may be. But it's time. And I think this double tennis elbow issue that's cost him all of spring training and probably 2 months of the regular season, it's a wake-up call. Yankees, you got to find a way to think past Giancarlo
Now,
Stanton.
how do you replace him right now? I mentioned the idea of just DHing Jason Dominguez a lot more. This is not a deep roster. There aren't big free agents sitting out there. Sean, I know you brought up the name Alex Verdugo, who is still out there, and sure, why not? It's an outfielder. It's not the worst thing in the world. So there are kind of like average to minor options. Even trading for a guy like Nolan Arenado, who my brain has reported the Yankees will eventually acquire at some point, actually helps in this regard because he can DH. Because when he does play third base, that frees Oswaldo Cabrera up for different roles. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a one-for-one replacement of Giancarlo, but they clearly need another bat. And the problem is these bats don't grow on trees right now. And a guy like Alex Verdugo is a flawed player. I mean, I don't think if they sign him tomorrow, Yankee fans are going to celebrate. Even Nolan Arenado, who I've suggested is a flawed player at this point in his career. So it's not an easy replacement for a guy that, let's be honest, if we are looking at each other and we're having a deep conversation about Giancarlo and we're being honest, no one in their right mind can expect him back anytime soon. It would be naive to think that Giancarlo Stanton is in a Yankee lineup before the summer, which means when we all made our Giancarlo prediction rumors 3 weeks ago, we're all going to take an L because we're all going to be off by months, and that sucks. But that's the reality.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I just think that this is now going from, hey, the Yankees lost Juan Soto in free agency to, they'll figure it out. They were never bringing back labor. Now this Stanton news. It just feels to me the Yankees have lost too much in their lineup too fast, that this is now bigger picture, more about everything they lost and not just Stanton. I don't like any of the ifs. I don't want to be negative on opening day. I'm excited for baseball to start. But all this talk about, you know what, you get Stanton back late summer. That's a good addition. You know, you have him ready to go for the postseason. This team's got to make it first. And I don't know how I don't know how any Yankee fan, Brian Cashman, sits there today and is comfortable with the lineup that's going to break camp here and start
opening day. Are you really worried about them making the postseason?
I am a little bit, Tiki.
I think the rotation is good enough.
I agree.
I mean, the Luis Gil injury hurt you a lot, but Marcus Stroman is here, as we've talked about multiple times.
Will Warren looks great so far in spring training. If you put stock in that,
so you could get some replacements from the guys that are existing here. I know it feels daunting because you have obviously Juan Soto, who's in Queens now, but you lose Giancarlo Stanton, DJ LeMahieu, Luis Gil. It just feels like there's a lot of names that you are relying upon that are done. But I also feel like a lot of those pieces were, like Luis Gil was the fourth starter. You know what I mean? Right?
Okay.
So, necessary, but imperative. He's not losing your ace.
But to my point, Luis Gil was going to be a young guy that you were hoping takes the next step off a Rookie of the Year. Right. I look at the Yankees right now in their roster, and it just feels like a house of cards. And you don't want to think about other injuries that could potentially, pop up. But I've said this before. Aaron Judge has an injury history. We were very fortunate last year. Max Fried, Garrett Cole last year. He got rocked a little bit today in the second and banged up. I'm not wishing or saying any of these guys are going to get banged up, but how many more key injuries are you away from going, you know what, this team is the third best team in the AL East alone?
What you hit on, and I know this is not a fun thing to think about in March, but I remember something I said to you last March. I looked at the Yankee lineup with Juan Soto, and I said, the best part about Soto being here is you have Judge insurance. Because the Yankees were a team, and we saw it in 23, where when Judge goes down, they're cooked. When Judge goes down, they get cooked. And that's a rare thing in baseball. Like, for one player to literally bring you down, and that's what happened partially when Aaron Judge went down with that injury in Los Angeles back in 2023. They have no Judge insurance. They are super reliant on Aaron Judge, not just playing 150 games, but being his ridiculously awesome self. So you're right about all the other questions in this lineup, but to me, the one thing that is the house of cards is that you need this unbelievable superstar in the prime of his career to not have a fluky injury like 2023 or even a downish season.
Yeah, I know you said this last year, and you were right. It prevented you from being over reliant on Judge by having Juan Soto. Like it was insurance. You could mitigate any Judge slump or injury. You don't have that at all. So you're fully hanging on Aaron Judge right now, hoping he can hang on, obviously, to the success that he's had over the last couple of years.
One thing you cannot rely on, unfortunately, and I like the guy, he's had a weird history here, is Giancarlo Stanton. How much is that changing your belief and expectations in this Yankee team? We'll get to your calls coming up at 888-808-1019. And when Brian Cashman met the media earlier today, He tried to be very straightforward, which I think Cashman does a good job of doing. But it also sounded like he's pissed at Giancarlo Stanton. We'll play you the clip. Tiki's very honest with this kind of stuff. He can read through Cash and tell us, is there some anger that Brian Cashman has toward Giancarlo Stanton? We'll get to that coming up. Toll-free number is 888-808-1019. A lot to do today. Bad Tiki will join us later in the program. Almost Champions, where we count down some of the most beloved almost champions in New York sports history. And if you thought Saquon Barkley going to Philadelphia was big, we came pretty damn close to something blowing that away. We'll get to what almost happened. Evan and Tiki on the Fan.